Welcome back, class 10, your history class. We were revising the first chapter, the First War of Independence. We were revising the causes. Today we'll revise we have finished two causes. Today we'll revise the other causes, starting off with economic causes. This is also known as India's exploitation. A natural consequence of British rule was the economic exploitation of the country. So, what was the result of the British rule? Natural result? It was economic exploitation. Exploiting means taking undue advantage. Number one, the ruin means the end of trade and handicrafts. The popularity of Indian textile alarmed means they were frightened, alarmed the policymakers in England. An act was passed in 1720 which prohibited the use of Indian silks and calicoes in England. The British rulers deliberately crippled Indian arts and crafts. Heavy duties on Indian silk and cotton textiles in Britain, 70 to 80% respectively, destroyed those industries. On the other hand, British goods were imported into India at nominal duty. Anything which was exported from India, especially silk and cotton, they had to pay tax of 70 to 80%. And the finished products which were imported to India from England, they had to pay nominal duty. By the middle of 19th century, export of cotton and silk goods from India practically stopped. The arts of spinning and weaving, which for ages had given employment to thousands of artisans, became extinct. Murshidabad and Surat now looked helpless and desolate. Now, second point is impoverishment, means poverty of cultivators. The zamindars or landlords had so far been only revenue collectors. Only the zamindars and the landlords collected revenue before the Britishers came. They could keep a certain percentage of whatever they received from the peasantry. So they used to keep a certain percentage. But the Permanent Settlement Act of 1793 made zamindars the absolute owners of the estates. They had the power to eject, means throw out, the farmers, cultivators for non-payment of the dues. If the farmers did not pay the dues, they could be thrown out. Now, permanent settlement remained restricted to Bihar, Bengal, Orissa. The Mahalwari system was prevalent in the central part of India, Gangetic Valley and Punjab. In Bombay Presidency and parts of southern India, peasants continued to pay revenue to the government. But the British revenue officers were strict in revenue collection. Almost half of the net produce was claimed as land revenue. Unable to pay land revenue, the farmers were driven more and more to borrow from the money lenders. Then number 3, India was reduced to an agricultural colony of the British. Very important. India was reduced to an agricultural colony. Why? Bihar, Bengal and Awadh emerged as a major producers of export crops such as jute, opium and indigo. British companies managed this export trade. The manufacturers in England required other raw materials also, such as cotton and oilseeds, for their industries. After the Industrial Revolution, the British did all they could to keep India mainly an agricultural country. Why? Because it was profitable for them. If India remained as an agricultural country, it was extremely profitable for the Britishers. This made India an agricultural colony of British capitalism. Number 4. Inhuman treatment meted out to indigo cultivators. Indigo cultivators were treated very badly, inhumanly. In 1833, the Englishmen were permitted to acquire land and settle down as planters in India. The peasants were forced to cultivate indigo and nothing else in the fields chosen by the English planters. Their crops were wantonly destroyed by the planters, their houses burnt, and their cattle carried off as plunder. If they did not listen to the Britishers, they were plundered, tortured, destroyed, their houses were destroyed, and things like that. Number 5. Annexation of rent-free lands and estates. In 1852, an Inam Commission was appointed to inquire into title deeds of the owners of large estates. Owners of large estates, they were supposed to produce their paper, legal paper, that they are the true owners of that particular estate. Many landowners pleaded that they could not produce the title deeds on account of passage of time. It was not possible for them to keep the title deed because it was not so prevalent. Nowadays that legally you are bound to keep your will and all. At that time it was not that popular. The government did not accept the plea and taken some 20,000 estates. This resulted in a lot of discontentment among the people. The landed gentry, known as Talukdars of Awadh, faced serious hardships after annexation of Awadh. Most of them were deprived of their estates. Proud aristocracies, says Majumdar, were reduced to beggary and servitude. They were reduced to beggary and servitude. They were no more aristocrats. Number 6. Loss of livelihood. Millions of artisans and craftsmen who lost their job had no alternative source of income. They did not have any other source of income. Introduction of Western education meant that Pandits and Maulavis imparting Oriental education will also become jobless in days to come. Obviously, Pandits and Maulavis will also become jobless because they were not, since Western education has been introduced, their education will become useless. Annexation of Indian states meant loss of livelihood for thousands of native troops. During the War of 1857, the sepoys of Awadh wrought havoc and added greatly to the difficulties of the British. Adding to all these various causes of economic exploitation, big famines were there. Life was hard even in years of normal crops. When famines came, people had to dispose of their land, cattle, and household goods to procure food, to get food. There were instances of mothers selling away their children for a few days' food. This is so pathetic. Mothers would sell off their children because they could eat food. The big famine of 1837 to 1838 made people desert their villages, that is, leave their villages and move around aimlessly in search of food. Famines were no doubt the result of drought or other calamities. The government could lessen people's misery, but it seemed that it had no will to act. The government did not have any desire to reduce the misery of the people. Now comes military causes. There are various reasons why army posed a threat to the British ruler. Number 1. Low salary and poor prospects, poor chances of promotion. Indian soldiers were unhappy because of their low salary and poor prospects of promotion. All the high ranks in the army were reserved for British only. The native sepoys could not rise above the rank of Rizaldar or Subedar. So They were not allowed. Indians who served under the British army were deprived of any promotion. The maximum pay that a subedar of the infantry could expect was less than the minimum pay of a raw English recruit. A raw English recruit would get more than the maximum pay of a subedar. So this naturally affected the sepoys' morale, mentality. Number 2, faulty distribution of troops. The troops were not properly distributed. In the key or important places like Delhi and Allahabad had no British armies. Moreover, at this time, England was engaged in several wars outside India. The Persian War, the Chinese War. The Indian soldiers knew that the British were in difficulties, so they were determined to strike because a very suitable opportunity was there. So they revolted. Disproportion between Indian and British troops. When Lord Dalhousie left India, company's troops, companies means British troops, consisted of 233,000 Indians. The British Army had 233 Indians and 45,322 British. Obviously, Indians were more. Dalhousie had written to Home authorities that more British soldiers should be drafted in the army. He failed to achieve what he intended. This gave courage to the English soldiers to take up arms against the British. Number 4, social distance between British officers and Indian soldiers. The officers or the British officers treated Indian soldiers like servants. The soldiers, on the other hand, were experienced men who conquered for their masters kingdom after kingdom. Obviously, the Indian soldiers were experienced who were worked under the Britishers because they worked for the masters, their master, that is the Britishers, and they captured kingdom after kingdom. They had conquered Punjab for the British only a few years ago, in 1848. The feeling of the sepoys, obviously the morals were also down, and it was can be known from the proclamation issued during the Great Revolt. So obviously the sepoys were also felt humiliated. Discontent and dissatisfaction in the Bengal army. The name Bengal army was a misnomer. Why? Because Bengal had nothing to do with the personnel, that means the people of the army. The sepoys and officers of Bengal army were mainly high caste Hindus, Brahmins and Rajputs of Awadh. During Anglo-Afghan war, they had to cross the Sindhu to go outside India. They very much disliked it because they thought that sea voyage was forbidden by their religion, because previously sea voyages were forbidden by the Hindus. So they were very disturbed. In 1844, some Bengal regiments refused to serve in Sindh till extra allowances were given to them. Now, number 6 point is loss of prestige in Afghan war. The first Afghan war was a complete failure from the British point of view. After an enormous waste of money and loss of human life, the British gained nothing. Not only that the British troops were defeated in the war exposed their weaknesses also. This increased the self-confidence of the Indian soldier, who felt that they could challenge the British in India also. So they had that extra motivation or extra confidence, because they found out that the Britishers were defeated in the Afghan war. Then comes General Service Enlistment Act. The General Service Enlistment Act of 1856 provided that all recruits of the Bengal Army should be ready for service everywhere, whether within or outside India. This act caused great alarm in the minds of personnel of Bengal Army, because previously Hindus, according to the Hindu religion, crossing the sea was banned. It was seen as a taboo in the Hindu religion. Now comes very important cause. All the causes are important, but this is the most important. The immediate cause, that means introduction of Enfield rifles. The immediate cause of the War of Independence of 1857 was the introduction of Enfield rifles in place of their old iron-made Brown Bess guns. The cartridge, means the bullet, to be used in the Enfield rifles were greased with fat of cows and pigs. The cow, as we know, is sacred for the Hindus, and the Muslims consider pig as unclean. The information about the greased cartridge spread like wildfire. It spread. So the whole Bengal army was seized with panic. So everybody started panicking and they started revolting. So with this, we come to the end of the revision of the first chapter, the First War of Independence. In the next class, we'll start chapter 2, revision of chapter 2, which is factors leading to the growth of nationalism and foundation of the Indian National Congress. Thank you for today.